So choosing parts for your new PC. So I recently decided to build a new PC. I've done it a few times, so it wasn't the first time I'd done it. So the first thing I thought was, oh, I'll go out and buy some magazines. So like this, you know, there used to be all these nice magazines you could buy, but I couldn't find any. They've all gone. These are the old ones that I bought in 2012, the last time I built a PC, so it's like 10 years since I built one. And of course in 10 years things have changed quite a bit, so I was thinking, what can I do? So what did I do? I googled it. And I found that there's quite a lot of stuff that's good for building a PC on YouTube. So and the first thing that I started to think about, having watched a few YouTube videos, is why do I need a new PC? What do I need it to do? So this is an important thing, and part of the reason why I decided to build a new PC was I'd been watching these menus or things popping up on my old PC saying this PC can't run Windows 11, and it was
getting before Steve. Have you thought about running Linux instead?
I did think about that, and I tried it and I gave up. I don't have the patience to learn something quite so different, but maybe Windows 11 is different anyway. So but anyway, and the thing about that I was worried about was that there was this thing that was coming up with Windows 11. It was really that, although I was quite happy with Windows 10, I was getting these various different messages saying your Windows 10 is going to stop being supported. So and on top of that, I did decide there was a couple of other things that I wanted to do. Lots of people talking about AI, ChatGPT, and various things like Stable Diffusion, and I decided I wanted to try and have a play with those. And my old machine, it would run Stable Diffusion just about, but it would quite often run out of memory, and then I'd have to restart it. So it was barely runnable on my old PC, and something like ChatGPT, there's no way it would run on my old PC. So I decided I'd quite like to have a play with some of those AI things, because about 10 years ago I actually did an AI course, an online course with Stanford University about artificial intelligence, and at the time I was working for the dating agency in Windsor, and we decided to use a few of the things I'd learnt to try and catch scammers, people scamming trying to scam our other customers. So we had a bunch of people from various countries like Nigeria and Russia who were pretending to be somewhere else and pretending to be interested in various people. Some of them were pretending to be women and some of them were pretending to be men, and who knows whether they were either. But they were posting pictures that you could find somewhere else on the internet, so we imagined that they weren't either. But we using the techniques I learnt there, we learnt how to train an AI to spot the scammers, and so it was doing a good job by the time I left after 3 years of there. So that was one of the things that we were trying to do, and so I was worried about the end of support for Windows 10. Luckily, they've made a change recently, although they decided originally they were going to end support in July next year. They've actually updated it, so they're not going to end support until a bit later. So you've now got a bit longer. You've got till 2025, October the 14th, 2025. It's going to retire. But they're not going to actually stop support until the day they retire it, which is unusual for Windows. Normally that you have about a year when they've stopped supporting it, but they haven't actually retired it. So you've got a bit longer with Windows 10, and I think that's mostly because of all this issue with the various things. You know, basically there's this minimum system requirement for running Windows 11, and although a lot of it looks fairly easy, the thing that is really the problem is this thing called the Trusted Platform module. So that's this bit over here. If I can find it. Oh, it's not showing the thing, but this thing called the Trusted Platform module. And although lots of machines have Trusted Platform module, it needs to be version 2, which if you've got an old machine, it may not be version 2, and if it's quite old like my current machine, it probably doesn't even have one. This means you can't actually run Windows 11 on it, which is a bit frustrating. So I did go through the process of thinking, should I move over to Linux? But I realised that a good portion of the software I spend most of my time using wouldn't run on Linux. There are Linux alternatives to it, but one of the things that I've really got into was using Photoshop for doing my photography, and Lightroom, and neither of those will run on Linux. And the alternatives, although they're similar, they're slightly different and work in a slightly different way. So it didn't seem like the right thing to do. So I went through the process and thought, well, what else do I need to do? And thinking about it, you know, this gives you quite a wide range of different choices you might want to make or you might not want to make when you're making a choice for a new PC. You know, most people want to do a bit of internet browsing. If that's all you want to do, you don't have to spend a lot of money. You know, it's fairly easy to build a small PC that does internet browsing. You might want to do a bit of word processing, spreadsheets, and maybe making presentations for the makerspace. That's not difficult either. But as you go down this list, the requirements for your machine sort of increase. You know, one of the things I have is I've got a whole bunch of old TV programs that I recorded over time, mostly off videotape. But you know, for example, all my old episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I'd hate to lose access to them. So I've got them stored on hard disk. So I need a bit of storage for my media. And one of the problems I've got at the moment is I've got some of my stuff on one machine, some of it on another. It's a bit of a pain having two machines, especially as the other machine is getting really old now. It's running Windows 7, so it's definitely well past its sell-by date. Definitely want to be able to do a bit of video editing in the future. It's not something I've done in the past, but it's something I'd quite like to do. I'm not particularly interested in games, but a lot of people are into games, and that might, if it's games you are after building a machine to do, you might need to think more carefully about what you're going to build, what parts you're going to build your machine with. My bit was AI software, and that means that I needed a fairly powerful machine to do that, because a lot of the AI software requires a lot of memory, and it often requires a graphics processor which can cope with all that. So if you go through this list, decide what you really need to do, and you reach a point, then the other question you might have is how much it's going to cost you, because the next step is, can you afford what you want to build? And for me, that was a question. It was definitely, when I added all the bits I wanted to buy, it's definitely more than I could afford at that time. So I couldn't start building it when I wanted to start building it. I had to wait until I'd saved a bit of money, got some money in the bank, ready to do it. But then the next step was, you know, I used to buy the magazines, used to just go through the magazines, find a supplier, and maybe buy a machine that was, I did think, well, is it worth building a machine? Can I just buy a machine? I couldn't buy the magazines, as I said. These things are all ancient now. They were very good at the time, but it was all, the last time I built the machine was about 2012, and they don't seem to have the same depth of detail in machines now, or in magazines, sorry, about the machines. So I went through YouTube and I started looking at various YouTube channels. One of the first I found was Linus Tech Tips, which was quite amusing, but after a while I realised it was more like a joke thing. It's quite amusing to watch. He tests bits of equipment and destroys them, really, and so I wouldn't recommend that in deciding what to use, because he's a bit unreliable. It's interesting, but don't spend much time on him. Some of the others, the PC Builder channel, that's a really good one. That guy has a really good channel where he goes to show you different YouTube videos about different things that have come out, and he's fairly up to date. And the other thing he has, which is really nice, is he has recommended builds at different price ranges. So he says, if you want a basic PC, this is a build you can do, and he'll have a complete video on how to put it together and the recommended bits of equipment, so they all fit together and they all balance each other. Because one of the things that I rapidly realised in buying a graphics processor, if you're going to buy a fairly high-end graphics processor for games, or in my case AI, you need it to be balanced with the motherboard of the machine. So and then the other thing that I immediately found as I was looking through these things was that there's been a big change recently in terms of how motherboards and PC processors work. When I built my last PC, there was a lot of articles in the magazines about overclocking, but it didn't seem necessary or desirable in a lot of cases to even bother with doing that. It didn't, for what I was doing, wasn't required. Nowadays, it seems like a lot of the motherboards are designed to do the overclocking for you anyway, and so it needed a bit of research, and that basically both Intel motherboards and AMD motherboards, which are the two main chip suppliers, have profiles set in them which will run the memory in your PC at the right speed for the processor you've got. So this is an added complication. It means that when you're buying memory for your PC, you have to not just buy DDR5 memory, which is the latest version, but you have to buy DDR5 memory that's been tuned for the sort of processor you're going to have. So this makes it more complicated to buy, and this was something I hadn't realised until I started to watch these YouTube channels. One of the other good ones is Jay's 2 Cents. He has various different recommendations and does videos on various different builds, and he's worth watching. And another thing I found was a recommendation for what to do after you've installed Windows 11 to make it nice and safe, so it's not giving all your details away to Microsoft all the time. So in the end, I managed, using that and some other videos that I found, to build a machine without having to use a Microsoft account to set it all up. I managed to set it all up with its own account on the own machine, and it doesn't send loads of messages to Microsoft and require me to keep logging into Microsoft to make it work. But one of the big things you realise when you're starting to build a PC, and this was true at the previous PC I built, is the compatibility requirements. And you've got all these various bits. You work out you need various things, but you might need some way of checking that they're going to be compatible with each other. And one of the things that I found was this thing called the PC part picker, and I'm just going to log into it here. So And once it is, I'll put it up on the screen. And it won't autofill for me. Why not? Does it? Let me. Apologies for the delay here. It's going to make me prove I'm not a robot. So, okay, so PC Part Picker is quite a nice website where you can basically put in the bits that you want. So what I did with this is I took one of the recommendations from the PC Builder channel, and I put in all the various different parts, and it not only checks that they're compatible, but it will show you the price that you might want to pay, and you come up with this enormous price and you think, oh my god, this is completely beyond my budget. This actually is a bit beyond my budget for a couple of reasons. One is I put some stuff in here I already had, because I wanted to make sure that the case that I already had decided on would fit all these things, and I also wanted to check that, you know, the whole stuff, and it's got this button where you can just hit the button and buy everything from Amazon, but I wouldn't recommend that. But anyway, so basically it allows you to try different things out. One of the things I was trying here was making sure that it would take all the disk drives I want. These Iron Wolf disk drives are the ones with my old Buffy the Vampire Slayer videos on, so I wanted to make sure they would fit in the
12
case.
terabytes each, that's a lot of Buffy.
That's a lot of Buffy.
Well, there's other stuff as well. There's other stuff as well, and they're running as a NAS, so it's got basically there's space on there for a lot of other stuff. So. But it's almost
You've
full
got a
now.
separate NAS, or you're running the NAS on?
I'm running my NAS on my PC, yeah, but I have got a separate NAS as a backup. So,
Okay.
you know, I've basically got
You
two.
decided to buy a new case, did you? Or?
I did decide to buy a new case, and I bought this Fractal Design case. I haven't brought that in because it's now full of the computer, but just so you can see a bit about what it's like, I brought the manual for the case in, which is quite an interesting little thing in itself. It's the nice thing about this.
Tower?
This is a full-size tower case, so it's fairly large, but it fits everything in, and it will. You've got different layouts. It's got this internal system where you can choose different layouts, and it means that you can move things around and fit things in the way you want them. So it's a really nice way of building it.
And you have to have a compatible PSU then.
Yeah, but most PSUs will be compatible.
Okay.
But the other thing that this thing will check is that the PSU you've chosen will drive all the things, because one of the jobs it's doing in the background is working out whether you have enough power from your PSU. So if you've chosen a wrong PSU, so you can see here I've gone a bit over the top. I've got a 1200 watt power supply, but that will drive the whole thing without any problem. And so What's that? Sorry.
Keep you
Keep you
warm.
warm.
Yes, it is. I don't need the heating on anymore.
Heating's down in our
So-
place, so we just run benchmarks on the computer to warm the room up.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. So that's the power supply that I bought to put in it, or the box for it. One of the other things that I was working on there was I want it to be like a bit future proof, so I might change things in the future. In the past, I've quite often built a PC and then made it last 10 years by taking bits out and putting other bits in, and over time that means it gets more and more power. It needs a bigger power supply, so I've gone a bit over the top. I worked out it would need 950 watts if everything was in there, and so I've added a bit extra on so that it will support the future requirements. One of the things that's nice about this power supply is that it has, if I can work out how to open the box, it comes with this modular way of plugging the cables in. So all the internal bits of the machine are on these plug-in cables. So you can leave, these are the ones that I haven't used so far. We have a nice little case here for them. So as the thing grows in the future, I can come back to this little bag of bits
So there's slots in the back of the
and
PSU.
hopefully, yes, and plug in a new power supply.
What
Connection.
processor did you end up picking?
So in the end, I decided I couldn't actually afford this 7900X, so I went for the 7700X. I looked at one of the ones that a lot of gamers are buying are the 7800. There's a 7800 one, which is sort of intermediate, which has got more graphics support in. But when I looked at the details, it didn't seem to provide anything for the AI version of things. It was just really more geared at gamers, so I didn't go for that one. So that's the box from the processor. The AMD processors seem to have a longer life on them, and they use slightly less power than the equivalent Intel processors. And one of the goals of this is to use it for some website developments that I'm doing, and I want to be able to leave the machine on all the time without it breaking the budget on my power bill. So that's why I went for the AMD processors over the Intel processors. Intel processors equivalent power when you compare the AMD and the Intel ones. The AMD use less electricity, so I went on that basis for the AMD processors.
Does that say 12 cores? I can't really see it from here.
This
12 core, yes.
12 cores?
Yeah. This that one was a 12-core processor. This one is actually a 6-core processor, but with 12 threads, so it's not quite as powerful. But in the future, I could upgrade to something, and this week, AMD have just announced 8000 series processors. So maybe sometime end of next year or the year after, I might upgrade to an 8000 series processor, because they had already announced that the sockets on the what they call the AM5 sockets on the board I chose would be compatible with the new next series processors. Whereas Intel have said exactly the opposite. If you buy a motherboard for a current Intel processor, Intel have already sort of announced that the next series of processors will not be compatible and you'll need a new motherboard. And the other thing that I was quite shocked by is motherboards now are a lot more expensive than they used to be. Certainly on the like the AMD series processors, it's got very complicated with 4 different levels of motherboard, and I decided to go for this B650E level of motherboard, which is not the highest power motherboard, but it's just about affordable. And there are some cheaper ones, B650s without the E, and there's some more expensive ones which are their 670s with and without ease. E stands for enhanced. Basically, when you start to look at what the differences are, it's mostly comes down to how many ports you've got for various things on the back. You know, what connectors have you got on the back that you need. I've got a fair number of things that I plug in, and my current PC, I'd actually extended it with a 10-port hub, so I could plug various different disk drives in at the same time, or various different things in at the same time.
Is that USB hub?
Yeah, a USB hub.
USB
And
3?
yes, my old machine would do USB 2 and USB 3. This new motherboard does USB 2, USB 3, and 3.2 and 3.2 X2. So there are different varieties of USB, which makes the whole thing more complicated as well now, because you know there's some USB ports will run at 5 gigahertz, some will run at 10 gigahertz, and some at 20 gigahertz. So you need to take a look at what you might want to do in the future, what bits of stuff you want to plug into it now, how fast will they run? Will any of them do 20 gigahertz? Probably not, but they might do soon. Who knows? You might upgrade to something that does it. And then one of the other things that I had concern about was how long it's going to take me to put all the new bits of software I want on this machine. So I want to be able to run my old machine and my new machine at the same time. And I've got an old a switch, which is an HDMI switch. So HDMI leads. So I had some HDMI leads, great. Unfortunately, when I tried these HDMI leads, they didn't work. Because both my old machine and my new machine will do 4K, and I've got some new 4K screens. I'd been using the old machine with DisplayPort outputs, which was working 4K quite well. When I switched over to the HDMI leads, these HDMI leads don't do 4K. And luckily, Steve had mentioned something like this to me way back, and it suddenly came to my mind why this thing wasn't working. And I had to go through the various leads I'd got in the box, and eventually I found ones that would work, but this is one of those that didn't. This will do 2K, but it won't do 4K. So be aware of that if you're planning to do a new motherboard and thing. And then the other thing that was different between my previous build and the new build is that the SSDs are now generally provided in this sort of format, and they sit on your motherboard. So this is the Samsung SSD. So rather than being a plug-in replacement for an IDE drive, or whatever they call them now, this is got a special connection called NVMe, and this is an M2 PCIe 4 NVMe drive. This one, the Samsung one, is generally regarded as the fastest that you can get at the moment, and I decided that's probably the best bet. Luckily, I managed to get it on an offer, so I didn't pay the full price that was on there. I got it slightly cheaper than that because there was an offer on the week I actually bought it, which saved me about 50 quid, amazingly enough.
So
But
you say that mounts vertically?
it mounts flat on the motherboard.
Oh, I see.
So, yeah,
Onto the motherboard.
onto the motherboard, yeah.
Size and shape like old school memory would have been.
Yeah, and so,
It's very clean.
yeah, and this is a very, and I'm very pleased with the speed of this memory. In fact, it's working very quickly.
So it's
So
effectively
if-
that drive C.
That's drive C.
Yeah.
So I've got a 2 terabyte version, which was about all I could buy at the time, and then since I bought this, they've actually announced a 4 terabyte version. Now, you might think I've got all the bits now. At least I thought I had got all the bits, but when I started to look at the bits, I realised, of course, there was one other bit that I hadn't got, and that's my graphics card. And somewhere here under the desk, I've got the graphics card. And you can see it comes in a huge box, and that's why I needed a big case for it, because it is actually a huge graphics card. And then the other bit I needed was some cooling, and I started off thinking I was going to use air cooling, but I actually couldn't buy the air cooler I wanted, and so I ended up with a water cooler for the processor, which was slightly more expensive, but I got a deal on that, so it
Has your case got a clear side so you can see all this?
it hasn't. I decided I'd no point. I didn't want to be distracted by all the lights flashing. The case I bought, you can get the version with a clear side. In fact, I think it's actually just about 10 quid more with the clear side. But I decided,
£4,000 on a computer. I want to see it.
well, I decided it's better not to look at it. Might depress me if I could see this. But
You can't see the fans because there aren't any.
well, there are fans. There's fans in this
Yeah.
water cooler, and
That's
actually
inside the computer.
that's yeah. But the fans are actually on top of the computer,
Ah,
so
right,
you
yeah.
can
Yeah, I
I
see.
could see them, but I haven't connected the lights, so they're not
Fans
flashing on.
on this thing as well.
There's fans on that. There's a couple of fans in the machine in the case, and there's these fans at the top of the machine, which is connected to the processor. So when I do the next talk, I'll bring the whole thing in so you can see it, and then we can, because by then I'll hopefully have a few more interesting things running on it, which I'll be able to demonstrate as well. But anyway, I now thought I had everything I needed. But of course, one of the things you suddenly start to realise is that there's a few little weird bits that you need, and one of them, of course, is the thank you. One of them is the thing that joins the cooler, the CPU cooler, to the CPU itself. That's a layer of what's normally thermal paste, and I thought, well, I'll get some thermal paste, so I bought some thermal paste, and I was about to use it, but then I saw a video about some new stuff, which is like a very clever little, it looks like plastic piece of material that you can put between the two, and it does the job of the thermal paste, but it means that when you change the processor in the future, you don't have to scrape off the thermal paste and put new thermal paste on. You can just reuse this layer of plastic, and I've used that, and so far it's been perfect. So I read good reports about it, and people had tested it beforehand. The guy, the Jay's 2 cents guy, had recommended it, and it seems to work very well so far.
Kevin, those transfer pads you're talking about, the heat thing,
Yeah.
do you have to buy specific ones for different parts, different processors? I know you do with the Intel,
They're-
but I don't know what you do with the
They
AMD.
basically do them in different sizes, so you just need to measure the size of the processor,
Oh, right. Okay.
and then you buy one the right size.
Right.
And that's only really so that you don't buy one that's too big, because the bigger you buy, the more it costs. So I bought one that fits the processor I've got. I'm hoping it's going to fit the next processor. Maybe I'll have to buy another one, but I won't have to scrape the thermal paste off the water cooler. But then I was reading about water cooling or various cooling, and one of the things that this machine, this motherboard has got, is some nice cooling heat sinks for these type of drives, these M2 drives. And so basically you're supposed to put the heatsink on the drive, and I found a disadvantage with this drive. It's actually not flat. It's not completely flat across the top. Part of the drive is slightly, about 0.5 millimetre thicker than the other part of the drive. So I ended up having to buy some extra thermal pads. So I bought some that are 0.5 millimetre thick and some that are 1 millimetre thick, and by doing that I can put the 1 millimetre thick on the bit that's not quite as thick, and the 0.5 millimetre thick one on the one that's thicker, and that way I've got the whole thing covered, and it's nice and tight, so it will do the transfer of the heat. because and I found that tech tip on one of the YouTube channels that I was looking, but it only applies to this Samsung drive, and it's quite obvious when you look at it sideways. You can see exactly what the problem is. Most other drives don't have that problem, and in that case the thermal pads that came with the motherboard would have been perfectly all right, but unfortunately in this case the Samsung drives are a bit awkward. So I think that is the essence of the talk. I'm happy to answer questions if you've got any other questions about what you might want to buy and what you might want to do. I would, as I say, I would recommend take a look at the PC Builder channel on YouTube. The guy there has links on his videos to different size machines, so you can size the machine in terms of price. Unfortunately, all his machines are dollars, but it's quite easy to take his designs, put them into this, see what it's going to cost you in pounds, and in fact, this thing will tell you different suppliers. It's not all Amazon. It generally does tend to recommend Amazon because often Amazon is cheaper. In fact, I bought all my stuff from Novatech, which was only very slightly more than Amazon. Some things were cheaper than at Novatech and some things were slightly more expensive. Overall, it was probably about 20 quid more, but I preferred to go and have a chat with them, and that was good because as I said, I was trying to do air cooling at first. I did buy an air cooler from them, but when I realised that it wasn't quite going to do the job, I took it back and they gave me the money back and sold me the other water cooler instead. So they were quite happy to swap it around when I realised I'd bought the wrong thing. So and Novatech are down in Portsmouth, so you can go and visit them and chat to them, and they're very helpful in terms of what they've got and what they can give you and all that sort of stuff. So that's it.
So that has an amount on it.
Yeah.
How much did you end up spending?
I ended up spending, because all these Seagate drives I've already got,
Yeah.
I ended up spending £2,980. So it wasn't cheap. And but I think I've got something I'm very happy with, and it will do me for quite a long time in the future. So it's upgradable. And knowing and having built it all, I've learnt again what the latest technology is in that area, and it gives me the ability to upgrade it. And I also realised that my current case wouldn't have coped with the new machine, even though in theory it should have coped. It would have been very difficult to fit it all in and made it quite difficult to build. Whereas there's now a lot of space in my new case. I'll be able to get up to 10 disk drives, moving disk drives in there if I want. I actually only need to put 7 in there, but it's easily coped with 7. So.
When you're saying you're going to use it for AI,
Yeah.
and that's one of the primary things for it. Are you using the graphics card then? Presumably you're using that as a standalone, not using the graphics outputs on it because you want all of the graphics channels available to use it for AI?
I am at times. Let's put it that way. When I'm going to use it for AI, I'm going to use the because the processor I bought will do the outputs. So I've got it set up at home so I can switch just to using the motherboard outputs and then I can use but when I'm doing Photoshop, I'm going to use the graphics card for Photoshop stuff.
Oh, right,
so
okay.
I've got it set up so it can do both
Is
things.
that because of the extra resolution, or is that because of the fact?
It's faster.
Interesting, because I thought.
At least the theory is it's
No, I
faster.
thought the new Photoshop supported both onboard and off.
It does. It does.
Oh, okay. So
But
that's why I was
it
wondering
does
if
seem quicker when I use the. But
Okay.
I might be confusing myself, so I don't know.
No, that's why I'm asking the question. Because
You make those selections, and I guess there's a whole lot of other selections you can make. Do you make those in the BIOS or something like that?
No, I simply make that by plugging and unplugging things. So, yeah.
I'm not familiar with water cooling at all.
Yeah.
Is it just bits of pipe running out the back and plugging into?
Yes, basically,
Sealed unit.
it's this
Because
this
I'd worry about the
particular
water.
unit is a completely sealed unit. It's got a little thing you screwed to the top of your your processor, and the pipes run up to. And you can mount this in a couple of different places. You could mount it either on the front of the PC or on the top of the PC. It will.
Pre-filled with liquid, is it?
It's all filled. You don't have to do anything. I mean, there are other schemes where you can make your own water cooling, and you know.
Would you happen to know if they're available? Those are available for sort of dual CPUs as well as for single. I presume they are.
That's when you probably would want to build your own, because what they recommend, if you were using something like this on a dual machine, the manual for the machine shows how you can put two of these in, one for each processor.
Yeah.
So this case would actually take two if you wanted, but then you'd have one separate ones for each
Do you mind me
processor.
asking what those coolers were? Is that
How much they cost, you
Yeah.
mean? This was just below 100 quid.
so that's pretty competitive. Okay. That's another thing. I heard it running. It's so quiet,
Yeah,
and I've got a rack unit that I'm trying to, or an X-rack
yeah.
PC that I'm trying to quieten down. That's got screamers on it.
Yeah, I've got
So
a
there's a
rack
rack
PC as well.
Yeah,
I
so
like rack PCs.
Probably don't need one that big.
yeah, they do.
Just one
Slight,
you could- When you could stick it on the side of the rack.
32 core with GPU on board.
yeah.
Dual Xeon.
Great.
So it's
Well,
pretty. Sorry.
thanks for that.
Thank you. I hope it wasn't too boring.